When we think of dungeon masters like Matt Mercer or Matthew Colville, as a community, we are generally inclined to think of them as truly legendary, and for many good reasons. Paul, on the other hand, is legendary for very different reasons. G'day mates and fellow adventurers, my name is Mordecai. The aspect that makes legendary game masters fascinating, especially to me, is that they can provide constant inspiration to draw upon, being a sort of role model for concepts such as respect for the players and demonstrating various bonds and methods for drawing players into their characters, not to mention being pioneers for their own contributions to the TTRPG community, with Critical Role being entertaining to watch and Matthew Colville's series on running the game being highly informative. Unfortunately, not every game master has earned their status as a legend through good and noble deeds. The other kind of legend that is often considered by the broader community are the kind of legends who we refer to as being infamous. The legends who may have transcended into being a living nightmare amongst the community. Some of them are known for throwing massive wobblies. Others are known for their undying commitment to making the worst games envisionable by any means. And with that, brace yourself, mates, for an experience provided by one of Reddit's worst dungeon masters. Before we get started with the story for the video, if I get to 1000 subs before the end of 2023, I have plans to cover an RPG story which predates the subreddit, and contains one of the most infamous characters in all of tabletop role-playing game history. Let's delve into the often terrifying world of r/RPGHorrorStories. Today's narrative is a two-parter, the first part of which is titled It's Not Us, Paul, It's You, and is written by user Boku no Kobolds. For context, I had only ever played Dungeons & Dragons with friends, and it was clown shoes. Anything above a 10 hit, that kind of stuff. We were dumb teenagers just getting into the hobby on the tail end of the 3.5e edition. When I left home after graduating a year or so later, I wanted to give it a real go, and the man that would be our DM defined how I swore I would never be as a dungeon master. We will call this man Paul, not his real name. Paul was at least twice all our ages in the group, and we were late teens to early 20s, all leading busy lives and gathering at the local game store, or when we were all familiar with each other, a player's nearby apartment. Now, it is worth mentioning that these points of contention all happened at different points of the campaign, and to this day the players we keep in touch with quote these and talk about them all of the time. Paul was a real stickler for not allowing you to play your class as the book described, especially my wife and I. For instance, my wife played a rogue, and Paul was adamant that the only way she would get sneak attack was if not one living soul saw her before she made her attack. And well, that was never, because one hide roll versus half a dozen at least search rolls is hard to beat. Now, the host's boyfriend at the time, who didn't enjoy D&D and only played because his girlfriend did, could make 12 attacks a round, had a pet pseudo-dragon that could make another 4 more at level 6. But we all enjoyed their company, minus Paul, who had a tendency to try and act like our collective dad. And with that, on to the individual incidents. It doesn't work. Why? Because it just doesn't. Early on, we had gained a little bit of a reputation within the capital city as people that get the job done, and it apparently drew some ire from someone. We arrived at our local watering hole to find a band playing. Cool, we thought. We love to see our local place getting more lively. Wrong. As the night goes on, you all start to feel strange, tired, out of sorts. The music is seemingly putting you all into a trance. I slammed my hands down on the table, excited as all get out. I could finally use Countersong, the bard ability that's hardly ever used. Paul had no idea what I meant, and I said that as a bard I could negate any sonic-based nonsense with sound of my own, and he seemed shocked, but without rolling or having me roll, said, "No, that doesn't work." and when I asked why, he just said, "It just doesn't work." To which I asked, is it coming from the band? Are they the source of our stupor? Yes, but it doesn't work. It wasn't that they were more powerful bards, they weren't illusory, it was simply so he could black screen wipe to the next morning, where we are being arrested for murdering a nobleman. Vision doesn't matter. At one point, we found ourselves involved in a small war. Our group had set up camp near where Paul had established that the battle would take place. We had taken cover behind some large boulders and rocky outcroppings near the battlefield. Our plan had been to set up numerous pit traps in the area, and to pick off the hostiles alongside our allies, riding the battle out. Nope. Before the enemy army even got to the pit traps, they stopped, drew out bows, and fired a rain of arrows at our characters, like it was a scene from the movie 300, where every member of this army now had a bow and all rolled to fire on us more than 1,000 feet out. When we confusedly asked how, by all means, they shouldn't have been able to see us, let alone fire on us when we were behind rocks and hidden from view. We were told, vision doesn't matter, and he rolled the attacks. You find all your bodies. A while into the campaign, we were all feeling burnt out, and as players we wanted to try some class swaps. So Paul proposed that we make new characters because he too wanted to change pace a bit. A lot of us were excited, talking about what we would play, and subsequently made and brought to the table. When the session actually started, it was basically a short time hop, a few months into the future of the campaign, and he sets the scene about our new characters rushing into a burning town, meeting at a crossroads in the center, where we find all of our previous characters burnt to charred husks by a dragon that took great joy in also stomping flat my gnome bard after burning him. It was about there that we as a group all decided, look, it's not us, it's you, and found someone else to DM for us. I can't say I missed them at all. Paul was always especially hard on me at the table. We all came together after a week of working to not just play D&D. We would discuss work, catch up if we couldn't see each other during the week, but Paul only had a problem if I in particular wanted to do that, earning me a "shut up" or "stop talking, it's game time," despite the conversations around us being non-game related. And so to that, good riddance. And that's where part 1 ends. Okay, I know that it looks like Paul is a mostly average flavour of bad Dungeon Master at this point. In fairness, we have yet to read the second part of the story, but before we can delve into that, there are a few things that need to be discussed. Paul definitely has his own vision for how he thought that the game was supposed to be ran, which seems commendable, until you realise that his vision contradicts both the rules as written and the rules as intended ideologies, which results in a game of furphies, such as the rogue not being able to take advantage of a core class mechanic, or the blatant favoritism to try and bring a new player into the fold by sheltering them from what the game is in the broader sense. You know, the same player who was already not interested is now being exposed to just how much Paul was antagonizing the other players. Really, any of these individual incidents by themselves would be bad enough of a red flag that the players should have noticed, and ideally, they should have had a discussion with Paul about what they were doing wrong with each red flag, or should have considered leaving the game. However, one of the reasons why players sometimes put up with these sorts of problems is because of the perception that they want to play a tabletop role-playing game, and that they might not get to play if they try to search for an alternative table or try to fix the issues. And now, with that, we have the second part to read, just in case you thought talking to Paul was an option. The second part is written by OP's wife, who was playing as the rogue in part 1. And so, let's delve into the second part of the narrative, titled A Continuation of the Stories of the Legendary DM Paul, and written by user Lady Azure89. And I have to give a content warning for grievous injuries involving young NPCs in-game. So a while back, my husband had posted a few stories about the game that the legendary Paul ran for our group. Naturally, there are more stories from that doomed campaign, some of which I am now sharing here. And now, let me regale you with more short stories from our table, courtesy of Paul and his legendary abilities as a dungeon master. Railroading at its finest. So we were sent into the forest to deal with a bunch of slavers that had kidnapped about a dozen or so young children, which took us 3 days into the forest from the nearest settlement, and we found them. We took out the slavers with little issue, but there was another problem now. We had over a dozen malnourished children to deal with that Paul made very clear that were too weak to even walk. Now, here were some of the ideas the party pitched in on how we can deal with this matter. Wait a few days, feed the kids, get them some rest, and then move on together. No, there's no supplies here in camp. So, is there a market for dead kids? Also, there was a half-dozen thugs. I guess they all just survived off of the air we were breathing. I guess they were too incompetent to actually hunt or anything. The second suggestion. They had horses, let's load them up on them. They had no mounts. So I guess the slavers just planned to walk with half a dozen kids? Also, during the fight, Paul mentioned that they had horses. I guess they were just ghost horses. Ooh. Okay, we load them up on the carts, was our third suggestion. The carts are broken. When and how? We even made sure of the fight to avoid damaging the carts. Our fourth suggestion was, the cages have wheels. It will suck, but if the kids stay in those while we move them, at least they will be better protected. No, the wheels are broken. Not even going to let us check? Uh-huh. Okay. Sure. At this point, with me being fed up, I say the dumbest idea I can think of. We take the bandits' tents to use as tarps, load the kids up, and drag it out of the forest. To which Paul claps hands excitedly. That's exactly right! That's the solution I intended for you to use this whole time! Everyone at the table basically responded with, "Are you serious?" The second story I shall regale to you is, that was a critical success, right? So, as we are dragging these children through the forest, we are attacked by sturges. One of them lands on a child's face. Our cleric attacks it, scoring a natural 20. You bring down your blade and manage to save the child, cleaving the sturgeon half with your claymore. Our cleric cheers. However, you also manage to deeply slice into the child's face, bring them within an inch of their life, and permanently disfiguring them for the rest of that life. Like, Paul, mate, she rolled a natural 20, not a natural 1. And now, for some ninja zombies. So we were about to make camp for the night in a clear field. We could see for miles around us. The sorcerer sets up an alarm spell, and I take watch as I had a very high perception score and dark vision. So as the party rests, Paul tells me to roll perception. I score a total of 19. He suddenly pulls out like 8 minis of zombies and puts them within 10 feet of our camp. No, he didn't roll anything for their stealth. You are all suddenly awoken by the sounds of moaning and earth being dragged. To which I snapped, how in the heck did they get so close? We also had an alarm spell set up. The party agrees, but Paul just shrugs and says, they are just that quiet. No, these weren't special zombies, just your basic shambling brainless ones. They weren't even under someone's control. I guess they were just ninjas or something in a previous life. You have no backstory or history. So we tried to make our characters, and when we wanted to give them their own stories, reasons for adventuring, etc., Paul refuses, telling us you cannot have backstories because your characters don't exist. One could argue that might be an interesting premise for a campaign. A bunch of people who just arrived in a world with no memory of themselves, or how they got there. But no. To this, we responded with, Wait, so what were we doing with our lives before this? Nothing. None of you did anything meaningful with your lives. Then why in the name of all heck would our characters do what should be considered the most dangerous job in a fantasy land? Being adventurers. This was the point where Paul responded with this gem. You have a family now, and that's your backstory. Oh, also you're a girl now. So early on my BFF was also playing. They had a character set up, and some of the very basic info was they were a guy which had no family, and they were trying to find their place in the world. We get to our first town, and Paul says, a young girl runs up to you and hugs you tight, screaming how happy they are to see their big sister again. All of us had WTF looks, and my friend was like, excuse me, but I am a guy, and I don't have any family that's part of their thing. Yeah, well, now you do, and I think you're better off as a girl. My BFF left the game right then and there. You don't get a prestige class either. So I was looking at the prestige classes for rogues and decided I wanted to be an assassin. Not to be evil, but be along the lines of a political spy deal. I don't know if there was a spy prestige, as I only had a few basic books. Paul tells me no, he won't allow any evil prestige classes. This put me off a bit, but that class does say you need to be evil, so I relented and decided, okay then, I want to do a Robin Hood angle. Take from the rich, give to the poor, that sort of thing. No, I won't allow that either. But that prestige isn't evil, it says so right here in the book. Yeah, but I don't want it. I ended up not being allowed to pick an advanced class at all. And now for a tale of divine intervention gone completely horribly wrong. So we got a new player who was playing a paladin. We were in a tough battle on a ship and we were in deep trouble. The paladin used his divine intervention as a Hail Mary. I think the percentile for your god to intervene at his level was you had to roll a 98. He got a clean 100. We all cheered, and the paladin was super excited. Paul pulls out the books to check, and we were all like, it's legit, the books clearly say his god is coming to help us. Paul grumbles. So as you pray, you see the clouds part, the sun shining down, but it's soon blocked as a massive shadow comes down, its scales gleaming in the sun. It's an ancient gold dragon. As a party, all of us get really excited. The dragon swoops down, stops to look at you all, and then flies away. We were all just dumbstruck. The paladin snaps. What? Yup, they came and decided this was not worth their time, and they left. Yes, so that happened. The last story I have from Paul's game for you today is, so why am I here? Paul had us preparing troops for a huge battle that was going to involve the fortress we were at. He had provided each party member with their own jobs, troops, and assignments. At first, this was honestly fun, as this was a really interesting change of pace. Well, as we were sitting down and getting set up, I noticed that I had no sheets or notes for me from Paul. And so I asked Paul, excuse me, where are my notes? Paul seemed confused. What notes? Joining in on the confusion train, I responded with, the ones you gave out to everyone? You know, with our jobs, troops, and so on. So, where's mine? Paul seemed rather perplexed. Oh, sorry. I forgot all about you. I guess you could do a couple of rolls to sneak around or something at some point. Wow. Not like I had been there for every single session, never missing one or anything, and putting up with all of this. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If I remember more, I'll be sure to post. In summary, the man, the myth, the legendary king of the railroad, Paul, makes life hell for our TTRPG party. Actually, I take that back. The 9 hells would have been more fun. And that's where the story ends. Well, that second part certainly had me thinking, what in the name of Hell's Kitchen are you doing, Paul? On multiple occasions. I'm not even sure what upsets me the most between the arbitrary railroading, or that Paul resorted to using puzzle design like what you would find in a 90s graphic adventure game, or how about how he decided to punish the success of his players, having that natural 20 result in a horrible outcome, and having the Paladin's divine intervention summon an ancient gold dragon that doesn't help out the party at all. Or how about the zombies that somehow moonwalked up to the party without stealth rolls, because having those zombies instead emerge from beneath the earth somehow wasn't an option? But perhaps the pinnacle is wiping out an entire player character's backstory and making alterations to their character without consent. And with everything put together, Paul has technically succeeded in turning into a legend of gross incompetence whilst having all of the skill needed to be amazing, routinely antagonizing their players, mishandling entire premises, and pure dedication to running one of the worst games for their players. With all of the stories that we have so far, it creates the feeling that Paul is acting out some childhood fantasy where he gets to make all of the schoolground bullies suffer in agony. But instead of against childhood bullies in the playground, it is a group of presumably unrelated blokes, many years later, that he's acting out this power fantasy against, and it is a tabletop role-playing group as well. He may not have been running the game by the book, but he certainly sticks to the textbook formula for childish behaviour. These kinds of furfies are not indicative of healthy behaviour. Paul may in fact need to go see a professional therapist. If having all of the players drop Dungeon Masters like Paul as though they were a sack of hot potatoes doesn't communicate to them that the way they are running the game needs to change for the better, then talking with those problem Game Masters can certainly seem hopeless. Which means that the next best option, particularly for those who find themselves in a similar situation, is to start a new group with the current group members aside from the problem DM. Learn the lessons that Paul might never realise, and run the best possible game that you can. I'll end this off by saying that I am equal parts curious and terrified by whatever other stories Paul has caused through his particular brand of dungeon mastery. If the posters write a follow-up story, I'm certainly inclined to read that as a follow-up video. It would be interesting to catalogue just how many missed opportunities to run a great game have occurred at this particular table. Thank you for watching the video. If you like my content and want to see more or wish to support the channel, please hit the subscribe button and maybe leave the video a like. It's free to do, and every bit of support is highly appreciated. Also, if you wish to leave a comment but can't think of anything to write, let me know you've reached the end of the video by commenting, "Paul, please learn something, dude." Again, thank you for watching, and I shall see you all next time.